Most people have no system for how they manage their cash. Paycheck comes in, they're like, oh, I automatically invest X amount of dollars per month to my investment account, and maybe my 401k came out of my paycheck, which is great. But again, this is doing nothing for you until you're 60 years old. A checking account is designed to spend money. Therefore, it's a spending environment. I pay my bills, taxes were already taken out of my check, my benefits were taken out. I'm going to pay for gas, groceries. Maybe I do some nice things with my family and spend some money. Now there's this dollar amount left. We naturally will not save 100% of our true excess cash flow. Most people won't do that because the default is that it lives in a spending environment. The month goes by, I don't need a buffer. Amazon's in my face. I could sneeze and I bought something on Instagram. Everyone wants me to sponsor their golf tournament. You wake up every month and you're like, where'd the money go? So the solve is
Hey, welcome back to the Revenue Vault. I'm Marcus Shan, and today we're going to talk about the part of revenue leadership nobody trained you for. What happens when you're making 300K, 500K, even $1 million plus a year, and you still don't feel free? My guest today is Mando Sallavanti III. He's a CFP and financial advisor who works exclusively with high-earning sales execs. He helps these high earners simplify their money, optimize taxes, and build real wealth around the life they actually want to live and not a spreadsheet. In today's episode, we get into why high incomes can still feel like a prison, what financial warning signs to watch out for, and how to build cash flow engines that protect you when the market shifts. So if you're a CRO, a sales VP, or sales leader with potentially unpredictable compensation and a big responsibility, this one is for you. Let's get into it. So, Mando, I'm pumped for a conversation today because, I know a lot of CROs who are in that boat where, man, they're making $300,000 a year, $500K, $800K, $1 million a year, but they still feel like really, really stuck. And I remember being in a really similar situation for years. In your experience, why do you think that level of high income so often fails to create real, actual freedom?
So what I've seen with clients, and I have one situation specifically about 3 years back, guy comes to me, exact situation you're describing. He had made $750,000 the year before, actually 2 years before he hired me. The year before he hired me, that dropped to about $300,000. Changes in the market, changes in their business model, just things outside his control. Because sometimes that does happen in sales or in business in general. What he had said to me was exactly what you're describing. I feel like I do so well. I'm great at my job, but I'm stuck. I don't know where to turn next. I just want to stop looking over my shoulder. And I think they feel this way in my client. Now he's been a client for multiple years, and many people in this situation, they feel this way because what they experienced before. You don't know what's going to come in the market. I mean, Marcus, just in like tech in general, all the layoffs that have been highlighting the news over the past, 6 months, but even really like 2-ish years, roughly. That could happen to anybody, as difficult as that is to think. So if we only have, let's just say, wealth tied up in our home equity and our retirement account, that's going to leave us vulnerable that if we do lose our job, now what? We have to dip into these things, pay taxes, pay fees, pay interest that we don't want to pay. So the solution simply becomes, okay, well, how do I create passive income, or as I like to call them, cash flow engines, which helps you towards that ultimate long-term goal, but also is going to be there for you in the short term if stuff does hit the fan.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting, right? And I think it's and why do you think so many people are so delayed in thinking about this, right? I feel like it's like something happens, like maybe they lose your job. Like, the average tenure, I don't know, the average tenure for most CROs and like sales VPs is like about 18 months. So that means like almost like going like job to job, right? Because of the level of pressure, whether not just because of tech, not just because of like, it's just really because you don't deliver your number for your org. There's immense pressure across the board to either get the results or they're going to be pushed out.
I think that
Mm,
is actually the reason why they
mm,
don't take action. The pressure
mm,
in their career is so much that they're
mm,
like, I can't put my attention and focus anywhere
mm,
but this.
mm,
And their family. Hopefully, they're prioritizing that as well, but
mm.
they can't put their attention anywhere else, which,
Yeah,
funny enough, is the exact reason why they should talk to someone like me or find an advisor they
yeah.
trust. So it's like,
Mm,
yes, don't think about it. Offload that, delegate that. You
mm,
delegate all the time in your career to whoever's on your team
mm,
and downward. Do that
mm,
with your personal life, with your
yeah,
finances and things
mm,
along that nature. So I think the delay
mm,
comes, 1, for that reason.
mm,
2, a lot of them are really smart people, right?
yeah.
Like, I think most people can go at their financial strategy and
Mm,
end up at a
mm,
worst case
mm,
70% of what their, like, maximum
mm,
potential would be. And
mm,
are they gonna probably live an okay life if they're there? Yeah, quite frankly, and that doesn't really put dollars in my pocket for people to
yeah.
hire me,
Mm,
but the ones who really wanna get the most out of their
mm,
situation,
mm,
that's where that extra, 30% or 20%, whichever way
mm,
you put it, comes with
mm,
working with professionals and taking advantage of everything that's
mm,
out there. And lastly, to close this loop,
mm.
I think a lot of these people are people that don't want
Mm,
70%. They want
yeah.
100%. They want to be the best.
Okay.
And a saying, perfection is the enemy of action
Mm,
sometimes. So
yeah.
if they can't be perfect, they're just
Mm,
like stuff this beneath the rug until we could
mm,
be.
mm. I think that you mentioned in some of your content, right? You use the phrase a seven-figure prison. Like, what does that look like in real life for like a chief revenue officer or a sales VP?
Very high income.
Mm,
So making $1 million a year,
mm,
but I have $50,000 in savings. $50,000 in
mm,
savings is
mm,
awesome for most people,
mm,
but the people that I work with, quite frankly, aren't most
mm.
people. They're
Right.
the not maybe
Mm,
not even like the one
yeah.
percenters is
Yeah.
probably estimating high when you look at
Mm,
things, but
mm,
they're not most people, right? So
mm,
if I have a small amount of cash runway,
mm,
all my other
mm,
assets are in illiquid vehicles, being
mm,
retirement, home equity, like I said earlier.
mm.
And now if I do lose my job, where do we go? Where do we turn? I don't have
Yeah.
secondary forces. So with our clients, like one of the things we like to do is think in buckets. And if you think like, say I have a really big bucket up top
Mm,
and there's a
mm,
little faucet on it. I could turn the
mm,
faucet on and there's
mm,
water and it could come out of that one and
mm,
into the next bucket, into the
mm,
next bucket, into
mm,
the next bucket.
mm,
So we like to think the one at the very bottom,
mm,
that's the money you're going to use today.
mhm,
The one above that, that's midterm
mm,
money that you're probably not gonna use today,
mm,
but it's gonna be there for an emergency.
mhm,
Your third one is, we don't plan to use this, but it's
mm,
there if we need it. And then the fourth one is
mm,
like, only pull in case
mm.
of emergency. It's like
Yeah.
break glass in case of
Yeah.
emergency. So when you're allocating dollars, you're
Mm,
thinking about what returns can I get? I
mm,
think everyone thinks about that, but people don't think about how
mm.
do I use the money? And when I don't
Right.
think about how do I use the money,
Mm,
that leads to me being in vulnerable positions
mm,
earlier. Yes, you might give up return in the long run to actually allocate differently this way, but you're going to have
yeah.
more peace of mind and you're going to be positioned to take advantage of
Mm.
opportunities.
So I think it's really interesting, right? Because I think you're 100% right. Where like, I think a lot of people don't even know they're actually in that position, right? Like they don't even know they're in the prison, right? Like because
Mhm.
maybe they're like, hey, like my W-2 looks great. My investments look pretty good in terms of like my 401k looks great. My IRAs look great. Like, I think I'm pretty good. Maybe I like 50K in my savings, right? But they're like, if they have one bad situation happen, they get laid off, they're put in a pretty tough spot, right? And what I think is really interesting as well is I think especially as people kind of climb the ladder, and this is what I've seen personally, right? Like, and I felt for this too. Like I remember being like, like like between 30 and 35, I was averaging over $600,000 a year, right? I ran a big org, like life was really good. And there was almost this like pressure I felt. It wasn't intentional pressure, it was pressure I felt where I'm like, okay, I need to buy nicer stuff because, everyone else had nicer cars. Like I saw the people above me, they had like really bigger homes, they had more cars, they had more the lake houses. They had more watches, more everything, right? So you feel pressured. Everyone's in private school, so it's like you're making a lot of money, but man, like you're actually deploying it in just different ways that don't actually benefit you. Is that something you're seeing across the board with some of your clients?
So let's think about like opt-in versus opt-out
Yeah.
culture in
Yeah.
general. And I'm going to use an analogy first. I'll circle this back to
Cool.
answer it directly.
Yeah.
Organ donors in the
Mm,
world. If you look at the countries where you have to actually opt in to being an organ donor,
mm, mm,
or if you're automatically opted in
mm,
and then you need to opt out, those
mm,
countries that you're automatically opted in are in
mm,
like the 95% plus of their
mm.
citizens are
Yeah,
organ donors, which let's just
that
talk
makes
about
sense.
that topic. Is it a
Mm,
good thing generally to be an organ donor? Probably. You're going to save
yeah,
lives.
yeah,
Realistically, if like when you pass away one day, you have your funeral,
mm,
no one knows whether there's organs in your body or not, right?
right.
And it's a funny topic, but besides the
Yeah,
point, comes back to money.
mm,
I'm making money. Most people have no system for how they manage their cash. Like
mm,
none. Paycheck
yeah,
comes in, maybe they're like, "Oh, I
mm,
automatically invest X amount of dollars per month to my investment account and
mm,
maybe my 401k came out of my paycheck," which
mm,
is great. That's a
yeah,
wealth building action to contribute
mm,
to a 401k, whether it's pre-tax, whether it's
mm,
Roth 401k.
mm,
But again, this is doing nothing for you until you're
mm,
60 years old. So when you
yeah,
talk about the reality of your financial situation, good move to invest for retirement. I'm totally condone that. But if it's
mm,
the only thing you're doing, it's going to hurt you. So now the
mm,
paycheck hits the checking account. Let's
mm,
center in here.
yeah,
A checking account is designed to spend money.
yeah,
Therefore, it's a spending environment.
mhm,
So if my check hits my checking account, I have my 401k come out, I automated something to my
mm,
investments, maybe I move some money to savings, I pay
mm,
my bills, taxes were already taken out of my
mm,
check, my benefits were taken out,
mm,
I'm going to pay for gas, groceries, maybe I do some nice things with my wife and with my family and
mm,
spend some money. Now there's this dollar amount left, whatever that is. We naturally will not save the 100% of our true
mm,
excess cash flow being income versus expenses. What's that number in between?
mm,
Most people won't do that because the default is that it lives in a spending environment.
yeah,
So now I have to say, oh, I'm going to move all that to investments, to savings, to buy an asset like real
mm,
estate, whatever it is. I might do half of it. Like what I see,
right,
Marcus, is people be like, "Oh, I have $5,000, so I'll
mm,
I'll, I'll allocate 2,500, but the other 2,500 a month, I'm going to keep that there just in case something happens. I need a buffer."
mm,
The month goes by, I don't need a buffer, and now it's in the spending environment.
yeah,
Amazon's in my face. I could
yeah,
sneeze and I bought something on Instagram. Everyone
right,
wants me to sponsor their golf tournament apparently now. Like,
yeah,
and the money's and you wake up every
yeah,
month and you're like, where'd the money go?
yeah,
So the solve is like we do something with our clients. We have a software that we do to help us do this. But even if
mm,
you don't work with us, you can create a similar mechanism.
mm,
The paycheck goes to a savings account, or we call it a reservoir, but it
mm,
can't be the same bank as where your checking account is. It has to be
mm,
separate because this is
mm,
part of what like disrupts the flow. So instead
yeah,
of paycheck checking account, it goes paycheck
mm,
reservoir
mm,
checking account. When the money hits that reservoir,
mm,
you know how people will automate to investments, like we just said.
yep,
We do that to checking with the clients we
mm,
work with too. So we say, all right, like I just had a meeting with clients last night.
mm,
They're spending $8,000 a month.
mm,
So we're like, okay, from your reservoir to your checking, a week before the end of the month, 24th of every month, we're going to send 8,000 bucks from reservoir to checking. Now we know it'll get there by bank transfer because it'll take a business day or two,
mm,
weekends, holidays,
mm,
etc. You'll be
yep,
good every month. 8,000 goes.
mm,
You spend that. Doesn't mean you don't spend any more money. It just means if you do, you're going to make a choice to spend it by
that's
going
right,
in,
mm,
transferring, and going from there. So by setting this mechanism in place,
mm.
it helps you get ahead of like the psychology of how
Mm.
you manage your money.
So it's really interesting, right? So I think let's talk more about the psychology. This is like it's very psychological, right? Because
Mhm.
it's like we're talking about having like a completely separate account intentionally. So there's this level of intention, focus, and decision you have to make in order to exceed the amount that you're going to be using. So tell me more, like when you talk about the psychology of money, what does that mean specifically?
So Another example,
Mm.
Billions is a show that I love. It's on Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
Someone recommended it to me last year. And I go download Paramount Plus. I get a subscription because I never had one. And I'm like, all right, I want to watch this show. Like, seems pretty cool. Main character, Bobby Axelrod, the antagonist, but he becomes his friend, Chuck Rhodes, the attorney. Good show. I don't know if you ever watched it, but if you haven't, I do
I think I watched
recommend
like one episode.
it. So I recommend it. It's a good show.
Yeah.
But besides the point,
Yeah.
I binged this show in like 2 months. Like, I watched right through. Months later, I'm seeing my Amex app pop up. Oh, Paramount Plus, $8.99 a month or whatever it is. And I hadn't opened that app in months.
Yeah.
Why am I paying for Paramount Plus still? Well, I'm opted into that. So the default is to pay for Paramount Plus. If they had said, Mando, do you want to cancel our service? Like, what are you doing here? I'd cancel it. Our money's the same picture, right? Like, psychologically, you got to set yourself up that wealth building becomes the default action. 99% of America, the default action is to spend money. Because that's their default action, the savings rate in America is 4%. That's the average savings rate.
It's wild.
The clients that we're doing what I just described with, it's 24% is their average savings rate. And that's after their 401k, which the American average is including a 401k contribution. Now, one piece of context before I shut up. Our number of 24% is, of course, we're working with a little bit higher earners, typically making $250,000 plus, 350, 450, 550, et cetera. But the point remains, because I've seen people at those levels making over $500,000 and they're saving 3% of their income. It's like, what are we doing here?
Oh, I think it's wild, right? I mean, there's this, I mean, you know, my mother-in-law, she's been in banking for like well over 30 years. And she would say, like, especially early on when she actually worked inside like an actual like branch, she would have like, and we're over in like, you know, Nike Town, if we're in Beaverton, Oregon. So sometimes she would actually be signing off on some of the actual physical checks. This is like back in the night, physical checks of like athletes, like the first big payday. There's like millions of dollars. And like, it's wild. Like they would like blow it all. Like she's like, they would blow within like a year. This is like some 18-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid just got like, you know, like an $8 million check and it's like gone. And it's wild, right? Or she see maybe even like just like successful, like, you know, you know, sales professional, a CRO, and they're making like really good money. So like, hey, they're making like, you know, about $1 million a year, but like every month they overdraw their bank account. Like, I think it's the wildest thing. So if someone has some of that, let's call it unknown wiring, that's kind of like some of these habits have been there.
Yeah.
How do you recommend they start to maybe shift that habit to go from that spending into that investing and building wealth environment?
So I think before you even talk about like mechanisms, you got to ask yourself, why am I building wealth? Like what am I ultimately working for? Because if we don't define that, there's always going to be a bigger number to chase. You can always go from, I have $1 million to 10 million to $100 million. Like there's never enough unless you actually define what enough means.
Yeah.
So we got to start there. Like, do you want to just retire at a certain age? Do you want to pay for something for your kids? Do you want to do something charitably? Like, what are the goals? Because if we don't do that, we're just going to be optimizing for the sake of optimizing. That's when we get into this rat race that is, quite frankly, self-manufactured.
Yeah.
So that's step one. Step two is what I've just been kind of yapping on and describing, which is like, put this reservoir mechanism in place, create that for yourself. If you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, reach out to someone like me and I can help with that. And I think having an advisor on the back end does help too, because then there's accountability behind the data, right? Like you can't just kind of doctor things up for yourself. Like there's accountability there. I think adding accountability in helps. You don't work with an advisor who's a friend that can help you, hold you accountable. I think in business in general, people always talk about like an accountability partner or accountability buddy. Accountability works. There's a reason that people always
100%.
talk about it. So add a layer of accountability to your finances. And then third, proactivity is key. Things are going to change with your paycheck. your commissions or bonuses or whatever your comp structure is, stock, that's going to be up and down. Even if, stock is a perfect example, the stock price is always going to change. You might get awarded new units. There might be new like ISOs, which are a total incentive stock
Yep.
options. They're a totally other ball game where it gets way more complex depending
Yep.
if you get them. What happens if you get those? What happens if you're at a
Yep.
private company? They're acquired
Yep.
now. Proactivity, I use those as examples to say proactivity is key. I think most people who don't hit their financial goals, in my opinion, it's just because they're not proactive and they don't have accountability layered into the plan that they set for themselves. We know what we have to do in general, but
Yeah.
it's like, are we going to actually do it without
Yeah.
accountability put in place?
I think it's really interesting, right? Because I think there's some really key points you just mentioned, right? Which I think is like number one, getting really clear on what's your core objective and why that's going to why is that the key, right? If you want to have 10 million bucks like in your investments, like so you can like walk away and do whatever you want. Do you even know why it's that number, or is that some made up number? What? Yeah, I call it your escape velocity number, right? Like, what's your escape velocity number to exit out of corporate? Because I find a lot of them end up wanting to be able to go do their own thing and have more time with family, right? So I think it's number one, getting really clear. But then number two is like being proactive, and I think that requires like obviously having like outside help to because you're already busy already, but to actually have someone third party look at your stuff and help you make better decisions, which helps with number three, which is like, how do you put the systems in place? Because it can't just be like, hey, here's this great number, let's kind of do it, but you need systems in place and you need that accountability. I remember like, I think this will probably resonate. I remember being like 21 years old and I was actually starting to think this way already, and I was dead broke. I mean, I was completely dead broke, but I'm obsessively reading millionaire books, wealth building books, billionaire books, and I'm so supposed to make $45,000 my first year, right? My base salary, maybe commissions, right? Like I'm like that's what I was supposed to make, right? But I was already thinking this way. So even as I made a small amount of commissions, I was already deploying that immediately into investment vehicles. And this is like back in like 2007, right? Very intentionally, right? So it was like it even wasn't very much money early on. It was just like habit I was like starting to build. That was way easier once I had that kind of go. It's a little bit easier to turn that $1 investment to $2, $2 a week, and then $3. You can increase it as you start to make more, right? So I think that's really really key. So we talk about like building wealth, right? And here it's really clear that income by itself is not wealth, right? Income does not equal wealth. So what actually does equal wealth in your opinion?
So you've got to look at all the areas of your life, and I'm going to use my personal experience of where I screwed this up, and early in my career, Marcus, like building my financial planning business, I actually started very well. Like my first year in business, I was able to land a good amount of relatively wealthy people, do really good work for them, and I made over 200 grand as a 23-year-old.
That's awesome.
I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, like
Yeah.
this is insane. But at the same time, and I could have done anything. Like you, like 23 years old with that money, like you have no bills, right? So it might as well
You can go buy
be 23
Maserati in
million. Might as well
cash.
be
You're like,
230 million.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm glad I didn't go blow it on a Rolex or
yeah,
something. Like
yeah,
first year I make
yeah,
any like
yeah.
relative amount of money. But in that time, my next year, this is probably one of the lowest, darkest times of my life. Like we were living in my now wife, we were living in her mom's basement. She had like a bedroom down there, and it was like a kind of mini apartment wing of the house. So we lived there for probably 2 years, and we're eating dinner like we always did. And like, I don't know what happened, but her mom's friend was with us eating dinner. She would be there sometimes. She's like, dude, you're off. Like, what's going on? And I break down at the kitchen table. Now here I am. I'm like crying in front of my then girlfriend, her mom, her mom's boyfriend, her friend, her brother. I'm like, I'm a 23-year-old supposed to be man at this point,
Yeah.
boy more than anything. Um, and
I'll
I'm
be all
and I'm
boys for a long time though.
yeah,
But
right,
anyways,
right.
yeah,
And I'm breaking down
yeah.
when I'm asked like, what's wrong? Well, then we start diving deeper. She's like, well, and I'm like, I just don't think I'm happy. I made a lot of money last year. I worked to no end, and
mm,
I like what I do, but I have no idea how I'm going to replicate it.
mm,
Like, that's where I was sitting, and what I realized was I neglected my personal life big time.
mm,
And I don't regret it because I don't think my business would even exist if I didn't go through that period, but
right,
I neglected my personal life. I neglected my faith. I
mm,
neglected relationships beyond my girlfriend and wife, I would say. Like, we were in a good spot, but like I really, neglected friendships, which I think is really
mm,
important. Um and I just saw I was so off balance in my life, and something needed to change.
mm,
On the other hand, I had the best example of the world. My father, growing up, my father's a family doctor,
mm,
and I played football. I played sports, football and basketball
mm,
mainly. I played all the sports growing up, but football and basketball up
mm,
until, through high school, and then I played
mm,
football in college. My dad never missed one game. I mean,
mm,
like, literally one game. The only
mm,
game he ever missed was a little league game that I had in baseball when I was like 11 years old, because he rides a bike. Like, that's how he works out, like a
mm,
on the road, he'll go, 30,
yeah,
40, 50 miles.
yeah,
He hits a pothole,
mm,
like, slams his head on the pavement,
mm,
goes to the hospital. That was the only game he ever missed of mine, and he, like,
wow,
almost died that day.
wow,
So, that's the type of guy my dad was, right? And what I found out later was, as he progressed through his career, he actually worked less instead of taking opportunities and promotions in the hospital
mm,
system he was associated with to make more money, just so he could go to all my games. So, like, even
mm,
present day, my dad probably works 30 to 32 hours a week,
mm,
roughly, which was very intentional.
right,
So I could have been making more money than my dad in the situation I was in, but
mm,
that's wealth to me. So it's like, look
mm,
at your life. What's your spiritual health? What's your
mm,
your family relationships, your friendships? Money, of course, matters, and we don't want to neglect that, because
mm,
lack of it will create issues in our
yeah.
lives. But there's more than just the monetary component.
Mhm. I love that so much. I think this is such an important message, right? Um, I remember, I think I was really blessed early on when I first started my professional career, where I was terrible at my job, right? And I made a lot of mistakes, and then I wasn't making any money. And over time, I started having success. I started to see other gaps in my own life. And I had really great mentors and coaches, and I read lots of books. And I think that helped me kind of shape the perspective. And you're a young guy, Mando. It helped me shape a very similar perspective you have now in terms of like, what does wealth really mean? Because like, yeah, for sure there is wealth in terms of like how much, like, financially, how are you set, right? Your assets minus liabilities, so you can put yourself in really good positions, right? But then there's like other components, right? And I think you'll appreciate this. And I think over the years, I created like a really simple acronym, or not acronym. I call it the M5. It's a framework where I'm like, if I have my M5 dialed, I am wealthy, right? And like an M5 breaks down to number one. The first M is like my mind. Is my mind set right? So meaning, am I doing things daily to feed my mind? Am I listening to great podcasts like this? Am I reading books that feed me and make me, that make me better, right? So how am I set my mind? But how am I also protecting my mind? How am I avoiding the bad stuff, right? Like, doom scrolling, or like, I don't watch the news. So, the negative, like, it doesn't help me personally, right? Gossip, I'm out. I try to stay out of all that. So that's the first piece, M on mine. The number two is like the muscle, which is like the fitness piece. Am I physically healthy? Am I working out? Am I eating healthy? Am I getting proper sleep? Getting the muscle dialed right? Then there's mission. So am I really clear on my mission every single day? Like doing what I feel like I was put on earth to do, to serve, if you will, right? So some people will consider that as part of, like, a spirituality as part of it as well, or the religion, whatever drives you, right? That level of mission. And then there's marriage, right? So it's like, and I think it's not just like, I think there's people with their spouses, and I think it's part of it. But I imagine if you were actually married to your friends. Are we investing in that relationship the same way that you do with your wife, right? Are we taking time, being present, helping serve them, right? So that treat that marriage like it's with all the right people in your life, right? And the last is money. Make sure your money is dialed. And that's the incoming money and how you redeploy it. And if I get all five dialed, I got a really rich life. Because I think, similar to you, I had friends, and I've looked above me, when I was in a W-2 corporate role. I'll see people that looked very successful, at least from like they're making a lot of money and maybe they have like, nice suits, nice watches, nice toys, nice everything, nice vacations, but they're physically broken. They don't spend time with their kids. They miss all the games. That's actually why intentionally early on, I started to stack the M5 consistently so I could retire from corporate at 35 to do my own thing. Because I had a young kid, I'm like, my number one goal is to be present, have complete time freedom. So I think what you're saying, it like really resonates. And I think a lot of people, if they're not intentional, they probably wake up and they're like, let's call it 50, 60 years old. And they're like, what am I doing? Where am I going?
It goes back to clarity, right? Like if you don't even
Yeah.
know what you're aiming for in your life,
Mm,
and we were talking about in the context of money before,
mm,
but it's everything.
yeah.
It is your spiritual, it is your fitness. Like
Yeah.
so many people go to the gym and they're just
Yeah.
like, oh, today's legs, like we'll figure out legs, or today's
Right.
chest, we'll like figure it out and go hop around to machine.
Mm,
Like if you don't have intention behind what you're
yeah.
trying to build and how
Yeah.
you want to do it, the likelihood that you get there is pretty much slim to none.
Oh, yeah. So let's talk about, because I think a lot of times for a lot of people, it's like they're trying to like, they know they should do these things, right? And I think sometimes people say, hey, once I get my money situation down, I can kind of do everything else, right? So if we
Mhm.
talk about even the money piece, what are maybe some financial warning signs you see of that high earning W-2 professional which says, hey, it's time to do something now?
Well, with high earning W-2, the biggest thing I see specifically for sales leaders who are in tech, a lot of them have RSUs or an employee stock
Mm,
purchase program,
yeah.
and they kind of just say, "Oh, that's great. Like I have this benefit. Some of them I don't believe this, but they'll say, "Oh,
Mm,
it's free money," quote unquote.
right.
But actually stop treating that like free money because
Yeah.
no, it's your compensation for
Yeah.
the professional you are in your
That's
sales
right.
career. And they're just structuring it a different way.
Mm,
So first, I'd be looking at things like stock compensation, like
mhm,
actual income,
that's
and
right.
then asking yourself, if I had this dollar amount dropped in my lap today,
Mhm,
would I be going and buying this one stock and just keeping it there?
mm,
More often than not, in my experience with clients, that answer is no.
mhm,
Somehow, almost everybody seems to do the opposite though.
mm,
So, first things first, like look at your stock compensation as compensation. It is called
that's right.
stock compensation for a reason.
Mhm,
The next thing, tax mitigation on these things. Like there's only so much that you can do from a W-2 perspective, but there are ways beyond just stuffing money into a retirement account to mitigate your taxes and reduce that bill on an annual basis. Oh, like anything, nothing's
mm,
too good to be true. Everything
mhm,
brings its own risks, and you have
mhm,
to talk to a professional. But there are ways to reduce that tax bill, even
yeah,
if you are just a W-2 employee.
mm,
If you have and one idea around that, like getting into real estate. I'm a big fan of real estate. I personally have 5 different rental units
mm,
myself, and there's things we've done with that to mitigate our taxes. I'm a business owner, don't get me wrong, but
mhm,
even as a W-2, there's ways that that can help you. So, getting invested in other areas. Risks come with that. I just have
mhm,
to say that out loud with any type
mhm,
of investment. I'm not necessarily saying
mhm,
go throw money in real estate,
right.
but there's things you can do along that nature. So, stock compensation, maximizing that, real
Yeah.
estate, thinking about it or looking at it
Mm,
as an investment. How do you position yourself to do it properly? Know the risks. Those are 2 big things that we're seeing a lot of our high earning W-2
mm,
clients doing.
I think that's really, really great. I think we should double tap. So, because I think about the situation I was in, right? Like this is like, so I think I was really, really blessed to grow up super poor. And because of that, I have developed certain habits with investing that started really, really young, even when I was making zero money. And that really helped me, right? And one of the things that, it's different obviously as a business owner, as you know that, right? We get we get many, many tax benefits, which is a big reason why a lot of people go do their own thing over time. Um, but as a W-2 employee, you mentioned a couple things like, hey, it's a couple ways to kind of reduce some of your tax burden. And obviously everyone's situation is different. What are some other unique ideas or simple ways you kind of see people not doing a good job with, or maybe a basic fundamental that they should be doing or looking into to reduce their taxable income so they are building wealth instead of just aimlessly paying taxes, which again, nothing wrong paying taxes, but I'd much rather pay the future version of myself first than pay taxes.
Yeah. So I'll knock out the quick ones and then I'll go into a
Cool.
couple that are a little more complex.
Cool.
Before I talk about these, I have to say this disclaimer. I'm not
Yep.
an accountant and I cannot legally give you tax advice. What I'm about to say is what we have done with our clients. And these are things that I would not suggest doing unless you're working with a professional. So I just have to say that out loud for
Great.
everybody. But going on,
Mm.
um, the quick one that everyone does, I'm going to max out my pre-tax 401k and that'll save me X amount in taxes. The flaw here is you're not saving money in taxes. You're just deferring taxes
That's
to a
right.
later date. This could be a good tactic for some people in certain situations. Others, it might not be. It actually might make sense not to defer there. The second one, that's another quick one. If you have a high deductible health insurance plan, you can contribute to what's called a health savings account. Typically, how this operates, your health insurance premium will be lower. You can max out this health savings account, get a certain amount of money in there every year. You can invest in the account, and then those dollars can grow. If you have health expenses, you could take that out tax free. It's the only account in the world where you get a tax break three ways: tax deduction on the way in, money grows tax free, and if I use it for health expenses, it's tax free. So that's another one. Most people know about those two.
Yep.
The next two, and again, just being clear, these two specifically, I would not do unless you were working with a professional, at least
100%.
an accountant and a financial advisor.
Mhm.
There are investments in the oil and gas industry that you can invest in. There's a part of the tax code, this dates back to, I believe, the early 1900s, that basically says if you have investments in what's called intangible drilling costs, you can deduct that against your income if you are a general partner in the investment. All that mumbo jumbo aside, it basically just says investments in intangible drilling costs, which are part of oil and gas drilling, you can deduct that against your income, no matter what your income is, W-2, business, whatever. So there's funds out there that if you invest in them, maybe 80% of their dollars that they're raising capital for are used for these IDCs or intangible drilling costs. That means if I go, I'll just use 100 grand as a round number. I go invest 100 grand hypothetically, and now I get an $80,000 deduction against my taxes. In that situation, if I'm in the 35% tax bracket, 35% of 80,000 is something like $28,000. So I just saved $28,000 on my taxes, and I moved the money to an asset that hopefully will get me a rate of return. Now, with something like that, again, everything has its downsides. Nothing's too good to be true. There's risks with those. Like oil and gas industry is quite literally the Wild West. Like you have to be really careful with your money. And by no means am I suggesting someone listening to this podcast goes and figures that out themselves. I strongly recommend, like, do not go do that unless you reach out to me directly and like, let's talk about it, because there are many people in that industry, sadly so, that you could lose all your money, like legitimately. You have to know who you're dealing with. But that's another thing, that an opportunity to reduce tax bill, like many things that are complex, especially, got to do it right. Second thing, real estate, but more specifically on short-term rentals. So this is kind of a gray area for me as an advisor, because usually we have to collaborate with an accountant on this. But if you have a non-working spouse, let's say your spouse stays at home, helps the kids, whatever they do around the house, they don't have like a W-2 job or something like that. Maybe they work part-time. In the tax code, there's something called real estate professional status. If you have short-term rentals, so say you're doing Airbnb, like we do Airbnb on some of our rentals, 7 days or less has to be your average stay to be short-term based on the tax code. Qualifying for real estate professional status becomes significantly easier than, or I should say the requirements are less than if you were not short-term rentals. So you can look into that, and whatever those requirements are, as you know, they get updated every year in the tax code. If your non-working spouse can qualify for that, that can be an opportunity that there's some accounting magic you could play behind the scenes to accelerate depreciation and costs of the rental properties you have, and that can offset your W-2 active income if your spouse qualifies potentially. Again, not necessarily recommending that to anyone listening. And if you do try to do something like that, absolutely should work with a financial advisor and an accountant and have them involved before.
So I think that those are two really interesting, unique ones, right? Number one is the oil and gas one, which is I think is very, very interesting, unique. I haven't heard that one before, actually. I think it's very, very cool. The short-term rental, the STRs, I think are also very interesting as well. And I think what's key is like there's always downsides to everything, right? There's always the upside and the downside. So it's like, is it worth the level of work to actually go and do that as part of it, right? What about some other strategies? I think, even as with retirement funds, so for many people who are high earners, they can't do a Roth IRA anymore, so they have to do traditional, right? So that's, it has its own pros and cons. Some will max out the 401k. What are some other strategies around that as well that people could be doing to reduce taxable income that might benefit them if they're like, I just need money down the road?
Yeah. So once your income hits a certain threshold, which it's different if you're single and a married filer, right, you can't contribute to a Roth IRA, which just for the audience, if you don't know what a Roth IRA is, after tax dollars go in, I can invest them. And then if I follow the rules that are set out in a Roth, they're tax free on all my growth later in retirement. So once you hit a certain income, you no longer can contribute based on the IRS rules. I would also say this, Marcus, I have seen more people than you would think that don't know that there is an income limit. And if you contribute to that, like for anyone listening and you're over those limits, you actually pay penalties to the IRS. So don't lose stupid money to something like that. So I'll just say that out loud as well. But
great point.
There are ways to do what's called like backdoor Roth IRA where I contribute to a traditional IRA, and then you can simultaneously, or right after, I should say, do a Roth conversion. I could convert that to a Roth IRA. And in that case, it gets around it as a loophole. You got to be careful though, because if you do this and you have some other IRA out there, there's another mistake I see often because people are like, oh, backdoor Roth IRA. I know what that is, Mando. Let's say I left a job before and I moved my old 401k into an IRA and it's sitting just, wherever it is. And I open this other IRA where I'm like, oh, I'm going to do my backdoor Roth there. There's a rule in the tax code called the pro rata rule. So basically they'll say, oh, you're going to max that IRA at $7,000 and convert that. Well, that's cute. You have that $300,000 IRA over there. So actually, this is not fully convertible, and now you owe us taxes and penalties on that $7,000, which on $7,000, not going to be a ton of money, but money that's now in the IRS's pocket instead of yours. So again, got to work with an advisor and an accountant on something like that to make sure you're doing it properly. Similarly, there's something called, like these names make me laugh, but mega backdoor Roth IRA or mega backdoor Roth that you do within a 401k plan. So if you have a 401k plan and there's what's called an after-tax component, not a Roth, it's called, I think most cases it's literally called after-tax. And it's just treated similar to what like your, people would think of as their Robinhood taxable brokerage account. Like after tax dollars go in, if I have gains, I pay tax on the gains. Treated a little different, but if your plan allows for in-service distributions, that's the specific term you look for, in-service distributions, you can convert your after-tax to Roth. And it's a way for you to basically get more money into Roth in addition to what you can put into the Roth 401k in the 401k plan. So now I can get more dollars that are being invested that are compounding tax-free. So those are two right off the bat. The other things that come into mind, once you're in like the 32, 35% bracket, this one's a little more controversial. And depending on who you talk to, some people hate it, some people love it. I'm more of the middle ground of like, it works in the right situation. And ultimately it all comes down to the strategy. Cash value life insurance. So these are, people refer to these sometimes as like rich man's Roth. And again, I just have to say, I'm not saying go buy cash value life insurance right now. I'm not saying that by any means, but these are other things we have seen clients use when they're in very high tax brackets. There's multiple kinds of permanent life insurance, which basically, to break it down simply for everyone, in these products, you have a death benefit, which that's why it's life insurance. You have a cash value. Typically, people don't like these because the fees of insurance are front loaded. The IRS did that because basically they're like, hey, this is life insurance. This isn't an investment. But if you qualify for what constitutes a life insurance contract, you can basically walk the line and press right against it of like, let's maximize these for wealth building, not just for death benefit use. So those are some other options. So these are, there are 3 or 4 things where you want to build tax-free future income, good vehicles to look at and consider and get educated on.
Hey, quick challenge. If you're a CRO or sales VP at a $10 million to $500 million B2B company, run the revenue leak calculators inside my diagnostic kit and tell me you don't have at least a couple million bucks sitting in your current motion. It's completely free. You get the playbook, the revenue impact calculator, and short diagnostic trainings. Link is in the description. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? Because it's interesting because I do some of those. Kind of had to, right? It's just, I have a really good CPA. I got a good financial advisor, right? So it's like very, very intentional, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, because I think it's like with every decision you make, there are trade-offs. There's the upside, there's the downside. I think on top of that, I think it's especially if you're a high earning, sales exec, and you're gonna like, okay, I'm gonna do like a mega backdoor Roth. I'm gonna do a Roth conversion, right? Which is cool. That's great, right? Or I'm gonna at least max out my 401k, right? What are things they need to be considering? Let's call it 10, 20, 30 years down the road for something like that. Some of these more long-term strategies that we maybe haven't discussed quite yet.
So let's go back to something that was created around the 80s called the 4% rule. So for anyone listening that doesn't know what this is, the 4% rule basically says, let's say I'm retiring and I have an account, an amount in my investments or assets. Let's just use $1 million for a round number, easy number to do math on. So if I retire and I have $1 million, the 4% rule says I could draw 4% of that, which would be $40,000 a year.
Yep.
I could take that per year in perpetuity for as long as I live, and not have to necessarily worry that I'm going to run out of money while I'm alive. Because the number one risk for people who go into retirement, will I run out of money?
Yeah.
I got news for everyone. You got one chance to get it right. Like there's no like, oh, actually, like I was kidding. Let's start this over. That's not how it works, right? Like we got one chance. So
well, I think it's why sometimes you see people who are like, you feel bad for them where they're like maybe in the 70s or 80s and they're working some of these retail jobs or they're still working these roles. They don't want to, right? They're obviously not
Walmart
happy, but
greeters, like
they're just not in a good spot,
Yeah. So we have to understand, like, if we are building assets, what can we actually take? Big on this point, quick sidebar, but big financial mistake I see. And I see people fall victim to this all the time. There's some like ETFs out there and there's funds. And ETFs are exchange traded funds. They're on a stock exchange. You can go buy them. But there's funds that are out there for investors to go buy, and they'll be like, oh, we have a 12% yield. We're going to pay you 12% per year. And people see the yield number of like, I'm going to get 12% dividends off this thing every year. That's a great return. But what they don't understand is what the underlying assets are. And if you look at some of the returns in the charts of the underlying assets on some of these funds, they're way riskier than people realize. And for the sake of, oh, it's going to produce me all this passive income, they go and invest in them. Next thing you know, 5 years later, they're getting their 12% yield, but their money was cut in half. So the 12% yield is only going down and down and down. Big trap people fall for. Don't want to fall for that. So back to the 4% rule though. The reason that the 4% rule is the number, and there's been many studies that have done this. Some people even say it's 3% now. Markets don't go straight up. Markets fluctuate. We know this. COVID, the market crashed. 2022, we had a down market. earlier in 2025, when the tariffs were announced, I mean, we had
Yep.
2 months there where the markets were down almost 15%.
Yep.
Like downturns happen.
Oh, yeah.
But if I'm retired, I still need money. If
Yes.
I'm relying on income from my assets, I still need money. So even if the markets over the long run will average 7 to 10%, if you're in high growth investments, maybe you're getting 10 to 12, which that's another conversation of how we allocate. But even though they average that, markets don't live in averages.
Yeah.
So you have to account for that, and the number becomes 4.
Yeah.
So most people don't think about how am I going to take dollars out. Here's the catch though, and in a good way, here's the catch. And this is why obviously I'm an advocate for working with an advisor because I am one, but this is probably the single biggest reason you work with a financial advisor before retirement and into retirement. What we do with clients is we create a strategy that basically says we're only going to have 4 economies that we're going to live in at any given point in time. So for example, Marcus, we're here today. We fast forward out to the future, and that's retirement. Let's just peg that as like some distant date in the future.
Yep.
At that point in time, if we take markets in general and we take taxes in general, you obviously have different things beneath the surface. Markets, you have real estate, you have fixed income or safe investments, you have the stock market, you have private markets. Taxes, you have income taxes, you have property taxes, you have capital gains taxes.
Oh,
There's different things beneath both surfaces. But in general, we fast forward the 4 scenarios we're going to face. Both of them will be higher relative to the past. They'll be higher than they were before. They will be lower than they were before relative to the past.
Mhm.
Taxes are lower or the markets are down and we're in
Yep.
a recession, or a mixture of the two.
Yeah.
One's up and one's down, one's down and one's up. So based on that, would it not be a worthy objective to create assets that at least one bucket we keep money in works best in each of those 4 scenarios?
100%.
It's exactly what we do with our clients. And instead of being at what 4% of my asset, 4% of my asset value is the income I could create, we see pretty consistently we can get people to 6 or 7% in a pretty like predictable, same level of risk and more strategic way. Now, to do it properly, it takes a lot of oversight and it takes real work, which is again why people work with us. They wouldn't if it wasn't.
Yeah.
But I see people, they never think about how do I actually turn the money to income, and
Oh, yeah.
how do I do it the right way? They just think about, let me get the highest yield or let me get the highest return.
I think it's really, really critical, right? I think it's why it's like I've found. I mean, I've talked to a lot of really, really people that are like 100x, million x above me, right? And I found they always have a longer time horizon on how they look at decisions, right? That's why we're having this conversation. I think it's really, really, really vital. So when I think about, because what's interesting is I'm sure you have probably talked to some people, Mando, where they don't have a financial advisor, right? Maybe they're just kind of doing their own thing. Maybe it's just like they got a Robinhood account or a Vanguard account or whatever. They're like, if they're doing anything, right? When I look at early on, when I was building my team, that's like I look as a team, right? Like I knew there's a certain lens how to look through things to make the best decision because I look at them as a partner, in the most unbiased way possible, if you will. How would you recommend someone was to go and like if they were going to get a financial advisor, what should they consider? What should they look at? What should they talk to them about? What are questions they should find yet to make sure it's a good fit for them?
It's cliche, but I genuinely think, like, do you just get along as friends in general?
Mm,
And I say that from the advisor side because over my time being an advisor now for 6 years, which is a blip on the radar, but even still with 6 years of meeting with legitimately at this point over 1,000 different people who have inquired to work with us and people who have worked with us.
yeah.
The ones where like things just break down I'm like scratching my head of like, why can't we get this client to take action on this, or like why is this client not understanding this, or they're taking action but like why does something just feel like we're missing something here or it
Yeah.
feels off? Every time I can point to like the relationship being a little bit weird.
Mm,
And I think money is a very hard subject to talk about in
Yeah.
general. Even if you're multimillionaire, money's still hard to talk about. Like, it just is.
Mm,
And if you have an advisor that you're excited to go chat with them just in general,
mm,
like, they get you excited about your future. They push you to expand your vision. I think that's more important
mm,
than anything. A lot of like the big talking
yeah,
heads in the finance space
yeah,
will really tell you like, oh, make sure they have this fee model or that fee model, and like make sure this. I actually think all that's BS, if I'm being honest with you,
mm,
Marcus. Like, do you align with them? Do
mm,
you trust them and think that they will act in your
mm,
best interest? And do you think they are competent and have the resources to help you? If you
mm,
think those three things are true, you're dealing with a good person,
mm,
they're competent, and you like them. That checks the boxes for me. Like, that's
mm,
all that I want to know, because at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter how much you're paying or how little you're paying. It doesn't matter what their fee model is. It doesn't matter if they're working for a big company or if they run a little shop. None of that matters, other than, will they help you get to the point you want to get to?
mm. And in your opinion, how do you figure that out, right? Like, 'cause let's say
Yeah.
you have a CRO who's like, man, I have never even like thought about getting somebody. Like, how would
Yeah.
they go about? I mean, I was like, hey, we totally jive with with you or somebody else, but like beyond that, how do they feel comfortable with their competency, if you will, and that
Yeah.
they can actually help them deliver to get them to the promised land, if you will.
So I think upfront, like before you pay them a dollar, like let's say they charge a fee for service. Some advisors are different. Some of them charge fee for service. Some of them just say, hey, you have to have a certain amount of assets. We charge a percentage of that. Some of them work off commission, whatever their model is. Um, Before you ever get into a point of implementation, they've got to at least show you like, all right, Marcus, we could really sit like, based on what we've done for other clients and what you have here, based on this factor, this should be about X amount of value per year back to you, or X amount of value like in this year that we can bring back using this strategy.
Mm,
Like, there should be a level of education before
mm,
you ever decide to work with them, that
mm,
you should have an idea like, well, not that I'm expecting them to give away the store before I use them and I'm just gonna like be a freeloader, but they should at least give you the sizzle to the steak, so to
mm,
speak, of like, this is where there's opportunity, this is why you should work with us, and
mm,
and here's why specifically for your situation. I think, something we do that I think is very telling. I have a list of 15 clients that openly told me, if people want to talk to us,
mm.
go right ahead and have them call us.
That's
Get
cool.
your get
Yeah,
the consent of
yeah,
or get from the advisor, I should
mm,
say.
mm,
Ask them to talk to, two of their clients and say, hey, based on my situation and what you see, can I talk to one or two of your clients who, I'm not saying are exactly the same, but just like relatively in a
mm,
similar situation? I think that's big. um Experience helping people like you is really big as well. Like, you
yeah,
don't want to be the project that your advisor is learning
yeah,
through, quite frankly. Like we,
yeah,
for example, if I had someone who's a $50 million business owner that came to me, like, I'm just not the guy that helps that person.
mm,
But if you're a sales rep that makes $500,000, you've got RSUs, you've got an ESPP, variable
yeah,
income, you want to get into real estate, like, I can help you. Like, you're the person that I've done
mm,
50 times over, more than that, with the
yeah,
clients we work with, right? So I think those are a couple things that you could think about, is like, how do I actually tell like, this is someone that can help me?
yeah. I think it's really vital, right? Because it's like it's essentially you are interviewing someone like yourself, right, to see is it going to be a really good alignment. Because it's not like in an ideal world, it's not like like, hey, we worked together for like 6 to 12 months, and I'm going to fire you if it doesn't work out. That's not how it works.
No.
Like this is like someone you can be in it for the long run with them, right? Like as long as possible, right? So it has to be a really good flow back and forth. And I think that was a great breakdown of being able to look at it, really in an unbiased way, right?
I have
Um,
one thing, not to cut you off. I have
yeah,
one thing I
please
actually
go
want
ahead.
to add that, on your comment I just thought of. Um, if the person is emphasizing like the deliverable of the plan, like if they like when they're talking to you, if the advisor is just talking about like the plan itself, and that's like what their value proposition is, and like they're trying to like wow you with like fancy softwares and like all this stuff. Like that's a red flag in my
Mm,
experience of an advisor that doesn't necessarily know how to actually deliver value to you ongoing. And this is more of a personal preference, but I
yeah.
also think you need someone that's going to like shoot you straight and like tell you the hard thing and be a little
Yeah.
abrasive sometimes, because we're trying to break habits we've lived with forever when we're trying to
Mm,
improve our finances. So you need someone that when you're making a bad decision
mm,
is going to say, Marcus, when you hired me, I told you that I was going to push you and there was going to be
mm,
times that I made you uncomfortable. This is one of those times that I need to do this because otherwise you're going to come to me in 6 months and wonder why you're not closer to your goal. So
mm,
that's a big one. And back to the whole plan thing, like if they're emphasizing the planning, like financial planning is a verb. It is not a noun. It's a
mm,
verb. It's
yeah.
ongoing. Life changes. You paid down your debt. You saved more money. You invested more money. Your investments fluctuated. Like, even if it's little things like that, the plan you made 12 months ago, you made 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 1 month ago, it is no longer valid. So it's got to be about the proactive nature. If they're talking about being proactive, working together ongoing, that's a green flag in
Mm,
my experience.
mm. And when you say proactive, like how would you describe proactive in your situation?
Yeah. There's got to be baked in touch
Mm,
points. So I
mm,
think like you leave the dentist, your next dentist appointment's on the calendar.
yeah.
That's how my dentist always was, at least. I think
Yeah.
most people's are that way.
Yeah.
With your advisor.
If it's a good dentist, if it's a good
Yeah.
dentist, they'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Um, your advisor should be the same way, even if it's 3 months out. I think there needs to be a cadence. Now, some of my
Mm,
clients we meet with monthly, some of them it's every 5 months. It just depends on what like their cadence that works for them is.
yeah.
Um, but there's got to be like, if nothing happens, we have a guaranteed time that like we're gonna spend intentional time to talk about this. So with our
Mm,
clients, for example, we do quarterly as our like baseline, and then we'll customize it based on what the client wants, but in general it's quarterly.
yeah.
So everything's on the calendar. We have certain topics that if nothing is top of mind for the client, there's certain things we need to hit on at certain times of
Mm,
year. For example, if it's November, we probably want to look at, are there any end of year tax moves we need to make
yeah.
so you can take advantage of them, just as one
Yeah.
example. And
Yeah.
then access in between those meetings
Mm,
is key. I'm like psychotic and OCD about answering my clients, not to be a reactive, like, slave to my cell phone, but with finances, I think we need to understand so many things are time sensitive.
mm,
So many things are actual emergencies. And your advisor can't be someone that's like you send them an email or a text and you don't hear
mm.
from them for 2 days. Like you
Oh,
better
yeah.
be getting response times
Yeah.
relatively quickly. I think 12 hours is like 12 to 18 hours is more than a reasonable thing, but like
Right.
more often than not, they should be answering you within a few hours at worst.
Yeah, I think it's so key, that level of responsiveness, right? Now, you mentioned something just a couple minutes ago about how some of them have bad habits that you have to coach them on, right? Like just like a good football coach would coach you if you have bad habits. What are maybe some of the bad habits you've seen that you've had to coach people out of?
Keeping too much cash,
Mm,
that's a big one, man. I mean, there's no reason if you make 350 that you should have 350 in your checking account.
mm,
Like it's relative. How much cash is too much cash, by the way, is
mm,
relative to what your income is, of course,
yeah.
because if I have 100 grand in cash for someone making,
Mm,
just call it to stick to that example, 350, maybe that's an adequate number that makes sense for that person.
yeah.
But if you make $1 million a year, like you probably want more than 100,000 in cash. So just
Mm,
one example, but
yeah.
how much money you keep in cash
Mm,
to the positive or the negative?
mm,
And on that point, there's kind of this continuum of like how much of your investments are focused on generating the maximum rate of return.
yeah.
I'll see a lot of arguments for the way people strategize with their finances of
Mm,
like, I'm not going to put my money in this vehicle because my private equity investments or my
mhm,
tech stock investments in Nvidia are
mm,
going to return more than that is ever going to return.
mm,
And while that may be true, the question is that the job of those dollars?
mm,
Because just like an organization, you have your BDRs, you have your AEs,
Mhm.
you have, VPs of sales, you have your CRO, you have your CEO, like whatever all the job titles in an organization are. Everybody's job is not the same.
That's right.
I don't understand why we don't get that with money, every dollar's job is not the same. So a big mistake that I see is people pretty much will be like, savings, box is checked, bills are paid for. Every dollar's job is now to go get a rate of return. It's
Mm.
not the case always.
Mm. I think it's a really good point. Right? I think even just the framing of that the money has a job. I think some people don't even think of it that way. Actually, I think a lot of them thinking more like it's just money. They don't, they don't equate to like this is like a little employee of mine, and they have a responsibility to do something for me, right? In terms of, like, I think the first habit you mentioned, right, the key about having too much cash in the bank, and I know it varies. Is there a rough formula or rule of thumb you kind of go by for how
Yeah.
much that you have?
I think if you're willing to take on more risk, 3 months is the minimum.
Yeah.
Three
Yep.
3 months of your expenses, including your lifestyle, is the
Yep.
way that I look at it. Some people will say
Great.
like just your pure bills.
Mm.
Another formula I've seen people use is like, oh, your fixed bills, like your mortgage, your car,
Mm.
your utilities, that's 6 months of that. I just like to say, what's your entire lifestyle, including you go
Mm.
for dinner on the weekends with your
Yep.
partner and
Mm.
whatever else you spend money on. If you buy stupid WWE belts like me, um, 3 months of that.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
that's the general number I like to go off. That's what
Yep.
I do personally. It changes person to person. I have some
Yep.
clients that they're like, Mondo, we want a year. Like we just need a year because we don't have job security, even though we make a lot of
Mm.
money. It keeps us up at night, and
Yep.
anything below this number is gonna bother us.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's really key, right? To kind of know. And that's why it's hard to say this is the exact number. It's contextually kind of based on your situation, how much risk you're willing to take on. But we do the same thing where we focus on what's our monthly burn, and then we have X number of months based off that. Not just like, hey, what's how much our mortgage is, and that's only debt we have. But it's like we look at it all, everything we spend money on, our lifestyle to keep our current lifestyle now. How much do we have liquid, that we can access really really easily? What are some other maybe bad habits you've seen where you got to coach people out of?
They try to, like, do everything themselves, and
Mm,
what I mean by that, like, obviously, we're talking about finances here,
yeah,
so, like, I'm obviously an advocate to hire an advisor, delegate that, save your time on managing your
mm,
finances. But even like the simple little things like filing your taxes, hire an accountant. Like,
okay,
please, not
yeah,
only will they save you money and probably not miss things that you're missing right now, but it saves you time also and
yeah,
headspace. Um, Cutting your grass. Like, this is
yeah,
a dumb one, and this might be a little bit controversial, but
mm,
I think that cutting your grass, especially if you're a seller that makes $500,000 and like you
yeah,
probably have a really high hourly rate, is it really insane to pay someone $50 to cut your grass when
right,
like it takes 2 hours or an hour or
mm,
whatever it takes? I just think little things like that we don't think about the
right,
value of just getting someone else to do that for us, and now that's an hour that we get back to spend
mm,
time with our family or with our kids or whoever it is, and meanwhile, the same people will be like I'm impartial, or I guess I should say unopposed to things like meal prep service. I think like a meal prep service is really great, but like don't meal prep your life away that like now you're not having family dinner and
right,
that's like family time that you're missing out there. So buying back your time, great book by Dan
mm,
Martell, Buy Back Your
yep,
Time. It's up there over my shoulder. I don't think
yep,
you can see it in the frame, but like thinking about the little things that way
mm,
that, oh, I'm going to do every little thing myself so I could save all the things financially. That's not it. Second,
mm,
where we spend money, I think more people make a mistake on this than anything. They spend money. You actually said something much earlier in our conversation that was interesting, Marcus. You're like, as soon as I started making this more like a higher amounts of money, I felt like I had to like buy the nicer things and like people have bigger houses and like a better car and like nicer clothes. And people will spend money on stuff that's not actually like doesn't actually bring them joy.
mm-hmm,
You want to go buy $100,000 car or an SUV or whatever you want to buy, great. That's fine as long as it fits your financial strategy and you can afford it. But beyond that, are you doing it for yourself because it actually brings you joy and you love cars and you love the way you feel in that car and you love getting into it every day? Or are you doing it because the other C-suite executive at your company
Mm,
drives a freaking brand new Porsche Cayenne and you gotta keep up with him? Like, spend your money on what makes you happy.
mm,
And lastly, off that point before I stop,
mm,
identify what does make you happy with money and focus there. So like a lot of people never retire because the only thing they find joy in is their career. And maybe
yeah.
you'll never retire. Maybe you'll transition consulting role, whatever it
Mm,
is. I've seen
mm,
clients of ours do that where they're like,
mm,
I'm not going to sell any more W2, but I'll start a 1099 and I'll do coaching
mm,
or whatever. But like get hobbies outside of your career. I'm
mm.
not saying spend all your time on them, but be curious, explore what makes you happy. And I know these aren't necessarily like the tactical, like financial things, but I think these are the harder things to get a grasp on that, like the money stuff leading up to them becomes a lot easier when these are defined.
I think Mando, you're so right. Where I think it's like sometimes, especially if you're like a hard charging, competitive person who has probably been pretty successful to become a CRO, sales VP, or high performing sales exec, like you have been paid to get results and to go after big things. And sometimes we get painted into this painted a vision, if you will, of what success looks like. It looks like climbing this type of mountain, right? So we don't even realize, we don't know why, but we now suddenly we want to buy that 911, right? Like, suddenly we want to buy, that 8,000 square foot house, right? We don't even know why. We don't even need actually, if we actually don't even need that actual, like that size of house. We don't actually need that vehicle, but we're like, but I want it because I've been kind of almost subconsciously marketed towards that, right? So you have to be really clear on those things. I think sometimes then we also forget about having hobbies. I made that mistake. Like I got so focused on my career, I stopped doing the things I actually enjoyed, right? Like just to, you know, read books and go on walks and hang out with friends and family. You kind of forget some of those things. So I think it's key to know exactly what you're optimizing for. That's why I mentioned the M5 from earlier. Now, to go back, I think I want to double tap on this one piece, which I think people get weird and controversial, which is spending money on certain things that give them more time back, right? Because I remember personally, I struggled myself, especially early on, because I grew up so poor, where I saw my parents do everything. They cut their own grass. When I had hair, they cut my hair. Like they did everything. We'd like, if my dad could clean our teeth like a dentist would, he would have done that, right?
Yeah.
Um, how do you help some of your clients make that shift to start outsourcing because their value of time is far higher?
There's something that I do in my business, but this applies to personal life too.
Mm,
And it's from like the EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System.
mm,
Traction is a book from there.
yep.
But there's like an exercise called Elevate and or Delegate and Elevate, I think it's called. And you basically have four boxes. One of them, you have things that I love doing and I'm great at, things I don't like doing and I'm bad at, and then like kind of a middle ground in the top right and the top left. So you brainstorm down like all the actions. And
Mm,
when it comes to your personal life, I do all the things like I make my meals, I cut my
mm,
grass, I clean the house, I do our laundry,
mm,
whatever those actions are. I shovel the snow if I'm
mm,
somewhere that it snows. Like I'm in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and we got snow a couple days ago. So with that, like identify what all the actions are right now, and then look at, I think just humor me and look online and say, hypothetically, if I was going to outsource this, what would that cost me?
mm,
Do another calculation and look at, I make X amount of dollars per year, divide it by 2,000 hours. Just say you work 40 hours a week. That's 2,000 hours in a year, a couple weeks for vacation. Maybe you take more time off, but you compensate because you might have some weeks that are 50 or 60 hours. So let's just say 2,000 hours. If I'm $1 million earner, 500 bucks an hour. If
yep.
I'm a $500,000 earner, it's 250 an hour and so on and so forth. So you can do the math. When you compare those numbers, unless they're like super similar in terms of what the hourly rate and
Mm,
cost are, like if it's 5x, if it's 6x, 7x, 8x, what that cost would be, I think it's something you should consider outsourcing,
oh, yeah.
especially if you don't enjoy it. So
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. My dad loves cutting the grass to this day. And he just like, he loves it. Like it's just, he gets his mind off things. He
Mhm.
gets out there, doesn't talk to anybody. It's kind of just like a peaceful time for him. He's never going to hire someone to cut the grass because he
Right.
loves it. So if you love cutting the grass, cut your
Right.
grass. But that's the way I would be looking at, like,
Mhm.
should I outsource these?
Mhm.
And as you get wealthier, like an assistant, personal assistant might make sense depending on how wealthy you are and whatnot.
Mhm.
Maybe at your job, your company will pay for an assistant at
Yeah.
work. Like I've seen some people go to their leadership and they've actually got this fulfilled of like someone stepping in, even as a part-time assistant. That'll
Yeah.
help you make more money in your job too.
Oh yeah. I think it's really, really interesting, right? Because I mentioned like because I grew up so broke and so poor. My parents were immigrants that came from China and Taiwan, so we grew up with no money at all. So we grew up just kind of doing everything. So I remember like as I started to make money, like even just the idea of hiring someone just to mow my lawn or to like clean my house was like outrageous to me. Like I remember my wife, like she came from a little bit better background, but like that's crazy, babe. Like why would we? I will clean the house. I will scrub the toilets. I will do this. So here I am, making like, $250,000 as like, like a 25-year-old scrubbing my own toilets, right? This is, a long time ago, but I'm like, but that was normal. And one thing I learned over time as I started, because I was, trying to shift my mindset to be like, so like, not scarcity, focused, more abundance focused, right? Trying to become like, like realizing like, if I want to become, a multimillionaire, a billionaire, I need to start doing the things that are doing now. And one of the exercises I started doing, which is really, really similar to that, and actually it was also in Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time, which is a time audit, right? So I remember like, early on, I still do it once a year. I'll go and on a Google sheet, for every 15 minutes, I just write down what I'm doing. So for like 2 weeks straight, it's very, very boring. I just write down real quick, wrote an email, mow the lawn, empty the dishwasher, whatever, from like personal, professional. And then after the 2 weeks, I go back and I associate each task with $1 per an hour for what it's actually worth, right? So I would have like, I had actually a negative $200 an hour. So that's like if I was like drinking, like, like if I was smoked weed or did anything like dumb like that, like, because I'll be less productive for like, for days after that. So I'm like, that's negative $200 an hour if I did that task, right? Then there was like, $20 hour tasks, like cutting the lawn, cleaning the house, administrative stuff, checking my email, then I had $200 hour tasks, right? So a little bit higher income with stuff, then $500 hour tasks, and then 2,000 hour tasks. And it was while as I did this, I'm like, my God, like I am spending so much time on these non-essentials. So kind of over time, it wasn't overnight, but I'm like, cool. First thing, we're getting cleaners. So now we're getting cleaners to clean the house. All right, I don't have to worry about that. Okay, now we're getting people to go and mow the lawn now, right? But it took time to get to that point where I remember even this is 3 years ago, where I had really delayed hiring an assistant for my business, just like really delaying. And I did a timeout 3 years ago, and I realized 35% of my time was spent on stuff that was like $20 an hour tasks. So like literally immediately I started searching and I had an amazing EA. She's been with me now for 3 years. She's been promoted multiple times now because she's been amazing. But it's completely like transformed like how I run the business. And I think if you're a CRO and sales VP, listening to this, like taking that time to really look at how you're spending your time and really seeing that value of time, man, it could be an eye opener for you where it might be pleasantly horrifying, where it's time to make some shifts to deploy some of your cash to get back more times you can make more money or have time with your family. So I thought that was pretty interesting based on what you said.
And it's scary at first still.
Oh
Like,
my
like, like when you start like paying someone to do something, you're like, I could do that. It'll take me 2
I
seconds.
know.
It's like scary at first, but then once you get in the groove of like, okay, I have this time back. I mean, I'm doing one of two things, and you hit the nail on the head. I'm either spending time with family and the people who are most important to me to invest in those relationships, or I'm taking actions that are actually going to help me make more money above what I'm paying for this.
That's right. I think what Dan Martell says in his book is uh, even someone doing an 80% 80% as well as you is still 100% awesome because now you can deploy that time towards other things that generate more revenue or more income, or maybe it's even just more time for yourself. So you have time to think maybe go to the gym, take care of your health, go to church, do other things. Like you can
Mhm.
redeploy in other ways that better serve you. So we've covered a lot of stuff today, Mondo. What have we not covered today that we should be covering, should be to be talking about as well?
That's a great question. We have covered a lot. I think one thing actually that we haven't talked. We had themes of this, but that book up there, Think and Grow Rich, something that book talks about is the
Mm,
power of the subconscious mind and
yeah.
us as humans. Like, we are creative, and not creative in the sense of like I can draw great pictures and do good Canva edits. Like, creative in the sense that the things we think of and speak to and talk
Right.
about will come to fruition in our
Mhm.
lives. I remember, Marcus, like my first year in business, I was pretty much on my way out. I made like 300 some dollars in my first
Mm,
3 months. I'm
mm,
now thinking I'm a failure. I
mm,
we touched on my dad shortly. He's a
mm,
doctor. I was
mm,
always going to go following his path. I didn't do it. I'm like,
mm,
oh, I made a bad decision. I'm failing out of business. I read that book and it changed my life because I realized, like, if I can focus on what I want and speak that to existence every day, and have a desire to chase that clear vision and articulate that, yes, I got to back it up with action, but I'm going to get closer every day. Right. So I just
mm,
think, like, the power of the subconscious mind in general in life, but with your
mm,
finances too, it's just there's nothing like it. And the most successful people that I've ever met and had the privilege to pick their brains, and some of our clients who are massively successful, they swear by working that muscle.
mm. Yeah, I 100% agree. I remember reading Think and Grow Rich in my early 20s as well. I mean, 'cause I went down this whole like rewiring of the brain like path, especially in my early 20s. I'm like, I obsessively read so many different books, and you've been wildly successful as a young guy. You mentioned that book, which is a great book. You mentioned Buy Back Your Time. Are there any other books that you're like, man, like these have had a profound effect on me, whether it's from wealth building to serving you personally, but they've just been very impactful for you as a professional?
My favorite book about money in general is Die with Zero by Bill Perkins.
Mm,
Uh, Five Levels of Leadership by John
mm,
Maxwell
great
is
book.
life-changing book for me. Um, I've got a couple others up here out of a frame that you can't see. Extreme Ownership by Jocko.
Great.
That's another one. One of the first personal development books I've ever read, but like still just super impactful. 10x is Easier Than
Okay.
2x by Dan
Mhm,
Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy,
mm,
another great one.
mm,
So those are a few that have had a big
mm,
impact on me. I'm a big reader as well, by the way. I think
mm.
what's that phrase? It's like not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers, or something like that. But I just think, like, reading, and you mentioned it with M5 before, like, what you're feeding your mind is
That's
so
right.
important because that's conditioning your subconscious. So, like, are you
100%.
feeding it junk food, which is like the news, sports
Mm,
talk radio,
mm,
wasteful things? Or are you
mhm.
feeding it like something that's actually going to help you grow in your family, in your career, and in your business?
100%. Great recommendation. Love those books. If people want to learn more about you and get to know you, want to work with you, where can they find you, Mondo?
LinkedIn's gonna be the best place. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, YouTube, venturing into that world as we speak now. But LinkedIn's gonna be the best place. I'm most active there. I'm most responsive there. I put out content at least once a day, pretty much, not pretty much every single day now for almost 4 years. So LinkedIn will be the best.
All right. So that's a wrap with Mando Sallavanti the third. Now, this episode hits you in the gut a little bit. That's a good thing because high income doesn't automatically create freedom. Systems do. And if you want help finding where your revenue engine is leaking inside your sales org, make sure to grab the free revenue leak diagnostic kit below. It'll show you where the deals are stalling and what to fix first. And of course, if you want hands-on help applying what you heard today to your team, book a call below as well. Either way, don't let this stay as good information. Turn it into action. Hey, I'm Marcus Shan, and thank you so much for joining us in the Revenue Vault.